then you need to do better for you. You need to sleep better. You need to eat better, because the only person that's being affected by your tired and your ability to function are the people you love the most. So even doing it for yourself, I mean, it's like a double whammy. It's why I love treating parents. I'm like, look, you're all going to do it in your house and watch how everyone shifts. Oh, this person's anxiety is gone. Hey, this person focuses better. We can't just accept that food doesn't have an impact on children's health.
You're listening to the Healthy Parenting Handbook podcast, just the thing you always said you needed when you first became a parent. Remember that feeling? Oh, where's the handbook for this? Now you've got one. I'm your host, Katie Kimball of Kids Cook Real Food, and I bring together experts in the fields of health, parenting, nutrition, and more to help you, parents who truly want to raise healthy, independent kids, get the information you need. My friends, parenting is the toughest and the most rewarding job in the world. Thank you for joining me to consult this Healthy Parenting Handbook, your guide to raising kids intentionally. My guest today is Dr. Kristina Bosnar, and we'll see, this may be one of the most important episodes I've ever recorded. In fact, my son, who edits these podcasts, says, "Mom, this one's really good. Everyone needs to hear this." He's 20, and if he's got that insight as a non-parent young person, please tell all the parents you know to listen to this one if you agree with him when you get to the end. Dr. Kristina Bosnar is also known as the Dr. Biohacking Supermom. She's Canada's only functional medicine doctor with advanced clinical training in pediatrics. Her extensive experience in pediatric and perinatal chiropractic allows her to combine the expertise of development and neurological insights with the exciting new functional medicine approach of diet and lifestyle-based personal care. Her story is powerful and impactful. And after you listen to this episode, I definitely want you to hit the show notes and visit her freebie, which is a download about brain-boosting foods for kids. It is the secret weapon to support your child's cognitive development, boost their memory, and enhance their overall well-being. My friends, this episode is about the fact that kids are showing signs of Alzheimer's. Kids with single-digit ages are showing signs of Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is probably one of the most feared diseases in adults, and we're seeing it in kids. Please keep listening. This is a very important episode. Hey, Dr. Kristina, thank you so much for being here. I am deeply intrigued by this idea that we're seeing a disease we think of as a disease of the elderly, the precursors of which in our kids. I think that it's a red flag we need to address, not with fear, but with education, which is what we are doing here. Tell us about you. How did you get into functional health? How did you become so passionate about kids? And a little bit, how many kids do you got in your own household?
For sure. So I've been a chiropractor for over 25 years now. Always loved kids, so knew I wanted a bunch of kids of my own. I have 3 kids that are now early and mid-teenagers. And I was always fascinated by the way the body works. And I've been in practice for a long enough time to see that our generation of kids is sicker than I saw 25 years ago, and it's very apparent to those of us who treat a lot of kids. My pediatric practice, in my clinical practice, is all new moms and babies and kids. And it's really shifted, I would say, in the last 15 years to what we're seeing. I'm really passionate about my kids being healthy, which is how you and I connected, because I was looking at your cooking for kids, and I have, subsequently followed all of those things. I love that. I think with information, this generation can be healthier than the generation ahead of them. And my passion is really to educate people. I think for me, the more I knew as a parent, and we're sponges when we become new parents, we want to learn all of the information, which seemed overwhelming. The more information we have, the better choices we can make, daily choices that lead to healthier kids, healthier brains. And there's an explosion of neurodevelopmental, brain inflammatory diseases we see. And I got my training in functional medicine maybe a decade ago after being a chiropractor for about 15 years. Really wanted to dive deeper. Took a lot of training with Institute for Functional Medicine, met the brilliant Dr. Terry Walls and did some of her training, which is very food and diet and lifestyle based, which I love because it's very practical for the everyday parent. And then I stumbled upon Dr. Dale Bredesen's research, and he was at that point had reversed Alzheimer's in over 100 patients and was teaching doctors around the world. I was very intrigued because it wasn't my intention to become certified to reverse cognitive decline in Alzheimer's. That wasn't my community of patients. I really wondered how that could be used, that information, those tools, to help kids early on learn how to live healthier lifestyles, learn how to avoid some of those things that 20, 30 years down the road would contribute to that. So that really became kind of a passion for me, along with all the diet and lifestyle things. And it's been incredible to even watch my patients with Alzheimer's see remission and see some reversal. That is, and I can tell you, there's no magic bullet. It's not one thing, which is why, podcasts like yours and parents informing themselves about little daily things that we can do every month, every year to just help ourselves and our kids get healthier. That's the long haul, right? It's like putting in the work early. So yeah, that's really one of the things that's really driving me right now. And if I can perhaps spin the viewpoint that like, hey, if we can do something early, our kids will never have those issues.
I want to prevent that for my kids, for sure.
Right. And for me, like for myself too, right?
Yeah, I think, I've been online for over 15 years now, and I've seen a lot of health fads and phases come and go, and like a million bajillion summits. And I will say that the most popular information is generally about the bad things that will happen to us as we age, specifically losing our brains. Nobody wants to lose their mental capacity. And so once you hit a certain age, kind of the parent, grandparent age, we're like, holy crud. Like we have to make sure that we don't get Alzheimer's. But I think what you're saying is that's not when we should start to take, steps. It's not about worry. It's not about fear. It's about education. So we're talking about brain health, and you say that has really changed over time. So catch us up a little bit on some of the medical history, and then we'll dive into like why we're bothering with this topic at all. Why are we talking about Alzheimer's and kids in the same sentence here, right?
Right.
So first the history, the education. What's changed?
And it's it is kind of unusual, but I really wanted to catch people's attention that when we look at something like Alzheimer's, it has also exponentially increased in the last 2 decades in terms of incidence and prevalence, and it's starting earlier and earlier. I think that what we can all see in this integrative health world, any of us that are, talking and looking at the research, is that brains are on fire in our children and our teens. I mean, we have behavioral issues. And I mean, I pulled some stats out because I thought it would be quite interesting. Like you look at an explosion of behavioral and neural disabilities, and we've got rates of autism, ADHD, and ADD exponentially growing. We've got 1 in 11 kids are diagnosed with a neurodiversity, and that's the kids that actually have the means to go and get diagnosed. We've got, teens are having anxiety disorders. Like they say that one of the studies I read said 31% of all teens have been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, which is enormous. 1 in 7 experience a severe mental health depressive mood. Like this is worldwide. So we're really seeing this breakdown. And for those of us who have little kids and teenagers, in every one of my children's classes, there's children with IEPs, which are independent learning because they don't learn in the same way. We have kids on medications because their parents are trying to help them focus. So it wasn't that way before. We didn't have these huge incidents of, I'm just looking at some of the research. One of the leading causes of death among 15 to 29-year-olds is suicide. It's the 4th leading cause, which just is all like these mental health issues, these focus issues, they all lead to something. And we're just seeing so much of it that we have to actually do something, because if we don't inform parents and we don't educate ourselves, what kind of a working society are we going to have? That's how I feel. Like, how are we going to even survive as communities if we don't have the capacity to have our kids become young adults who can work?
I feel the same way you do. I really do. But there are some loud voices out there who are saying neurodivergence is just our experience of diversity. It's just an expression of different brains, and we need to accept that. And we just need to help, people with neurodivergence figure out how to harness their superpowers. And we just need to teach them to be okay with that. And the world needs to adapt. What do you say to people who are of that opinion?
Well, so I can tell you that many people who know me well, and many kids I have who come in with, let's just use the diagnosis of ADHD, because I see a lot of that in my chiropractic practice. I tell them it's my superpower. My superpower is to be able to focus on multiple things. My superpower is to have enough energy to be able to do enough things, to be a mom and run a clinic and be an entrepreneur. And so one of the things I think that I maybe disagree with, which may or may not be controversial, is that I don't think we need to label everyone who is busy with some sort of neurodiversity. I think the education system has changed. This is a whole nother topic we can talk about, but the education system isn't set up for the type of children we're having. And we also aren't moving the same way. So some of the things we've lost in our childhood that we had, which was lots of outdoor time, lots of movement, lots of fresh air, and we need to move. We're hunter-gatherers. So as a species, we're supposed to move. So some of it is that I think we are not putting kids in the environment that's best for them. Some of them, I think, we're just looking for diagnoses with kids that don't fit the mold. But a large proportion, and I will say, I have seen a huge amount of kids who really, you can see they cannot sit still. They cannot focus. They feel bad about themselves. Those are the brains on fire. I see it on a weekly basis. And I think that neurodiversity we can accept and we can have different teaching styles. But when we see a child that's suffering, and we can all see it as clinicians, we see it right away. It's a brain on fire, and we have to peel away the pieces that are inflaming that brain. Be it peel away the pieces that are inflaming the brain and add what the brain needs, or a combination of both. But I can't accept that 1 in 7 kids or 1 in 6 kids are going to be on the spectrum by 2030, and that 1 in 50% of them are going to be boys. I can't accept that we have changed so much in 40 years that it's just education about neurodiversity. And there's a million things, that can be contributing. It's not just the one thing, like we're just on the internet or I eat poorly. It's a huge amount of things.
Sure. And that it's not just that the brains are being built differently on the line in Santa's workshop, and it's all okay because there's a root cause and there's a lot of neuroinflammation. Let's do a little Webster's dictionary fun here. I do want to hear you talk about what neuroinflammation is. And also at the same time, is there a difference between mental health and brain health? Do we have to differentiate, or is it the same thing?
So for me, neuroinflammation is just inflammation in the brain, any part of the brain. And depending on what part of the brain it hits, it's going to have a different affect. It may be a mood disorder. It may be, emotional dysregulation. If it's in your frontal lobes, it can be uncoordinated kids, right? If it hits their cerebellum, and that's part of our motor pathways. So,
and the inflammation, it's physiological. Like it's something.
It's a physiological inflammation.
Cut open the brain, not that I want to, but you could see it.
Well, and the research is really interesting. They took kids with ADHD and looked at volumetric studies of the brain. So for people who don't know what that is, it means the size of the brain, the actual volume, and found that 74% of kids in this particular study had smaller brains. So had shrinkage in their brains. They did the same thing with teenagers with anxiety and depression. And they also saw shrinking in the brain. When we diagnose someone with Alzheimer's, one of the things we can do is look at the shrinking in the brain. And so there is a common component here that we would never look for. So in Alzheimer's, we look for this plaquing in the brain, which is actually the brain like putting a Band-Aid on an area that's inflamed, right? We would never look for that in a child with ADHD or autism or anxiety because we're not looking in that lens. But if we were to look, it'd be really interesting. Would we find the same sort of plaquing starting early because the brain is inflamed? And that's not to say that can't be changed, because if we can change it in Alzheimer's patients and we see it. And it is so exciting, every single patient that we see changes in, or even, let's just talk about stopping deterioration of brain dysfunction. Because when you stop the cognitive decline, someone doesn't die. Because at the end of Alzheimer's, people die because their brain can't function anymore and their body can't function. And that's the sad part of it. So if you can just stop it, you're feeling good. But if we can take those principles we know are stopping it and apply it early, I think it's so profoundly effective. And who wouldn't want any of those options to try to know?
What I'm hearing you say, it's both fascinating and remarkable, but ADHD, autism, anxiety, and Alzheimer's have more than just the letter A in common. Now we're on Sesame Street. They have neuroinflammation, you're saying, as a common factor in all of those diseases, the way, so they're presenting themselves in different ways on the outside, but on the inside, very similar. Little frightening that we're seeing, similar symptoms to Alzheimer's in kids.
Well, they actually even present with the same symptoms. When you think about it, you've got someone who can't focus and get their work done as they get older, that mild cognitive impairment that, by the way, takes 20 years before we actually give it a name. You forgot something, you didn't do something. We see the same thing in kids with ADHD, in kids on the spectrum, kids that are anxious, can't sit and focus. It's actually the same symptoms. We're just looking through a different lens, which is, it's kind of why I wanted to speak about it, because I thought if we can take a look at it and see it's all the same umbrella.
Well, you're saying, what if we look through the lens of Alzheimer's at our kids? What new things would we learn? Right? It's thinking way out of the box.
And how would we be able to see someone in trouble already and say, okay, this isn't a one thing fix, okay, if I can get him to get good grades, then he must be okay. Because that's not, life is so many more things. And yes, we want our kids to feel successful in school and feel like they can focus when they want to. but there's so many other things that get affected.
Right. If we're just putting a Band-Aid on the symptoms or just looking for a better score, whether that be school or behavioral modification, we've still got this underlying problem that likely, I mean, we almost don't know because we haven't really seen many like a whole generation of kids with ADHD become 80-year-olds. Have we?
No, I don't think so. It's really been in the last 30 years we see, and maybe we could even say the last 20 years, we see an exponential increase. And you were saying what you were saying just back there when you were saying, there's all some common components. The kicker is that there's 37 different things that can be causing any number of those behaviors. So it's never the same thing, which is why I think it's challenging for people initially, because we're looking for that silver bullet. We're looking for I'll give them fish oil. That must work, and it's not. And it's different for every single brain.
My next question was going to be, well, where is this inflammation coming from? But I think you just told me 37 places. So that might not be the best question to ask. Well, what about, we have to dig in. We've got to dig into the reversals. But first, if I'm a parent and I'm thinking, like Dr. Kristina is saying, I might have early signs of Alzheimer's in my kid, what kinds of symptoms or behaviors can parents look for to say, I need to look into brain inflammation?
Right. And so we look at inability to focus, right? And actually, the really inflamed brains are the kids that you can see, they twitch, they cannot focus. And we know those kids. We're like, oh, that's my busy kid. But there is a level that is uncontrollable. Tiredness all the time. Tiredness all the time is also a sign of brain inflammation. Not remembering things. People are like, oh, they're not listening to me, but sometimes they don't remember things. Chronic headaches all the time. That's brain inflammation, right? And the brain could be inflamed because we didn't give it protein and it's had a sugar crash. There's so many reasons. Tiredness, slow growth, brittle nails. We don't look at things like that. One of the things I try and tell people is if you can look at your child's physiological growth, and there are signs that there's nutrient deficiencies, which we know are affecting the brain, or that there is some sort of toxin exposure, which usually comes in the form of headaches or joint pains or weird rashes, which we never connect, right, with that brain or that behavior or mood dysregulation. Now, that being said, some kids have bigger moods than others. So we have to look at the spectrum of I have 3, one has bigger feelings, always. But when he's dysregulated, they're really uncontrollable, even as a teenager. So really looking at those things. We accept chronic constipation because we know, and you asked me, is mental health and brain health the same? If we know that our brain and our gut are affected together. So if our gut is inflamed, our brain is inflamed. And we know that in mental health, we lack the appropriate combination of neurotransmitters to help us manage whatever our needs are. And those neurotransmitters are made mostly in the gut. Then we have to look at chronic constipation or diarrhea could be causing an issue too. So it's kind of all of the messages that your kid's body is sending them and they're expressing to you are messages that something inside is not right.
And it sounds like specifically if you're seeing multiple items on that list, not just my kid has big moods, but
exactly
other things as well.
Yeah. Well, and it's And like I said, some kids have bigger moods. We have to accept our children how they are too. Some are just bigger feelers. Some are busier. Out of my 3, one is more like me. He's very busy. So that's not one of those signs, but those kind of lingering, we've tried everything. He doesn't sleep well, or we're not sleeping well. If we're not sleeping well, then we're definitely affecting our brain cells. They say 1 night of suboptimal sleep can cause brain inflammation and start neuronal death. Neurons are some of the brain cells. So we know lots of kids that don't sleep well. They stay up late and they can't get into deep sleep. So that inability to get to bed also is a sign that the brain can't function properly.
And these just really aren't things to be brushed under the rug. I think that we're seeing in our culture a great acceptance of, parents are like, oh, my kid has ADHD. I took him to the doctor. I want some meds. What is the shift that if you could rub the genie in the bottle and get the shift to happen in the sort of the culture and the parent's mindset? What do we need to see?
Well, I think that the basic understanding that we were not taught that symptoms like anxiety, ADHD, constipation, all of those symptoms that are, not for good functioning on a daily basis are messages to the body, to the kid that there's something wrong. And actually teaching our kids that, it's what I love to do in my practice, is teach them, hey, you're really cranky this morning. Why do you think you're cranky? I could say to my kids, and my kids are educated enough now. They're like, I ate some shitty food yesterday. and for sure, I feel cranky. I feel like being, moody. And they're able to articulate it but we taught them, right? And so I think we were talking about this before, just accepting that, 1 in 2 kids is going to have a behavioral issue by 2030, or that our kid just has this issue. We can also still, on top of that, you can accept that, but you can also still look for ways to optimize their body health, right? Just optimize overall health. That's what we do with our patients with cognitive decline. We optimize the body. Yes, they may have arthritis. Yes, they may have some structural changes, but what can we do to get better? And these are the basics that maybe our grandparents did and that we slowly did less of, and now our kids do less of. And we can't sit back and accept that we just have a sicker generation. Well, I mean, we have to be proactive and see, we can't wait another 10 or 15 years. We have to do something today, tomorrow. We all know, we could do a little bit better, have another glass of water, go to bed a little earlier. We all know. So it's just really understanding that we are setting the stage for long-term chronic brain inflammation, decline really early, and the symptoms don't manifest for a long time.
It sounds like the answer to what can we do is the same or a reverse answer to what happened. We just have to walk backwards. So what are, some of the best options that parents can approach and embrace? So we don't want to see our kids suffer, right? I don't want to see my kids suffer now. I don't want to see the fact, if I see a red flag and think, oh, my kid's going to be really suffering in 40 years, they're going to have early onset Alzheimer's potentially. So what kind of things can we do to reverse that?
What a terrible thought, right? You come from listening and you're like, my kid has ADHD. I put him on meds and oh my gosh, I'm not preventing his Alzheimer's. So I don't want panic, but I want you to understand that some of the things are really, really basic. And if we know that when our kid doesn't sleep well, we have lots of parents over the holidays are like, my kid didn't sleep well. They were so moody. I'm like, okay, so how can we instill really good sleep habits? These are such basic things, right? How can we not accept that food doesn't have an impact? I mean, we have a generation of parents, I'm included in them. I just have a different perspective because I've seen the healing power of the food. How can we accept that we don't have time to make food or that our kid can't figure out how to eat well? We have to take a step back and say, you are what you eat. Your brain is nourished with, and breakfast, I always tell people, breakfast is one of the biggest, best ways to get your kid thriving in the school day. And if you are doing a bowl of cereal and milk, it's a sugar bomb. I'm so sorry. I know it's easy. Your kid can do it themselves. It's a sugar bomb. And if that kid happens to be the kid that's a little more on the ADHD spectrum, or has a little bit more neurodiversity, or has a little bit more anxiety, now you've set them up to be more anxious because you didn't give their brain what it needed first thing in the morning. And maybe that same kid gets crackers in the afternoon, and maybe they get a granola bar for snack, and now they've had no nutrition, and their brain is on fire. And their reaction is more anxiety, unable to focus. The meltdowns, we call it the witching hour for the small kids between 5 and 6:30 when you can't get dinner ready because their bodies can't handle it. So I think that when we're looking at solutions, I think that the biggest thing to say is that there isn't one thing. You can't come away with one thing and say, that's the thing. There isn't one thing. That's why modern medicine hasn't been able to fix any of these issues because there isn't a drug or a thing. There is food, and there is sleep, and there is fresh air, and there is clean water, and there is protein and fat intake, and there's removing chemicals and seed oils. And oh my gosh, there's so many things. So that's probably not helpful. You're probably sitting there listening to us going, oh my God, which one of these things did I do?
Right. I mean, it's a yes and, right? So it's true. We can't just give them a pill. We can't just have a one easy answer. And so I like that you're not sugarcoating it. Sugar would be inflaming our brain anyway. But tell us, unpack a little bit, because you mentioned cereal, cracker, granola bar. Those things are putting fuel on the fire. They're making the inflamed brain worse. But why?
Okay, so let's even just take a step back and go. Alzheimer's has been put into many different categories. And the categories based, at least with Dr. Dale Bredeson's research, based on what caused the brain inflammation. Many causes. So if I can take you through a little bit of that, then we can maybe talk about, well, how can we avoid these things in our kids? Because sugar is one of them. So glycolytic type of Alzheimer's is literally diabetes of the brain. It's sugar inflames the brain biochemically, and it's multiple ways. It's that it's actually just inflammatory to the brain. Kids exponentially process sugar faster. And the other piece is if your kid is just eating carbs, nothing wrong with a carb, but if that's all they're eating and there's some high sugar, the blood sugar drops are severe, and that's really inflammatory. So that is one factor with brain inflammation. Then we look at toxins. just environmental toxins. So we're not going to go through in depth, but we know that one type of Alzheimer's is caused by toxic exposure. So if you live in a damp, moldy house, if you live in an area where there's lots of chemicals, right? If you are putting beauty products on your kid, creams and things that are full of toxins, those can impact brain function tremendously. And a lot of my patients with early onset Alzheimer's in their late 40s and 50s, almost always one of the testings that we find back is mold and mycotoxin exposure. And you can have a house full of kids and maybe 2 of you respond badly to mold toxicity. And maybe the other 2 are good detoxifiers. And I see it a lot in kids with behavioral issues, whatever we call it. It's just their body screaming. And so one of the other ones would be bacterial overgrowth. And that all imbalanced bacteria in the gut microbiome really a lot of the time comes from poor nutrition, not feeding the good bugs and feeding the bad bugs, sugar, processed foods. The good bugs get affected by things like aspartame. They get killed. So, your kids cook real food is so, I feel like every single parent should do this with their kids when they're cooking, because when a kid learns to eat real food, not a packaged box of something that we pour water in, but a carrot, which we can eat easily and right, then it feeds their microbes, which helps make those brain chemicals, which help with the inflammation, but help feed and make the brain work. And then we have things like just lack of movement. There's a big trend now for, muscles and making muscles and muscles, working out, producing the brain-derived neurotropic factor, BDNF, they call it, that helps stimulate brain cell growth. We know we can grow new brain cells, and kids are not moving. They're sedentary. Forget about being on the computer or the iPad when mom and dad need to do something. We have these things in our natural environment, but they don't move at all. And it should be like number one family rule. Weekends we're outside moving. We're doing something. We're running up and down the stairs cleaning, whatever it is. Kids are, I read a study about a month ago that showed that young boys, because they're so sedentary and they did a cohort study of 900 and something children, boys between the ages of 15 and 22, and they found that testosterone levels were 50% of what they were 20 years ago for men, because there's so much less muscle mass, right? And muscle helps with our testosterone growth, and much more sugar consumption. And what people don't know is that sugar not only inflames the brain biochemically, but it can push the testosterone towards estrogen. So we're seeing this estrogenization of our boys as well. And that inflammation can also, affect the way our brain functions, because testosterone and estrogen have an impact on the brain. So it's a big net we have to cast, a wide net, and just pick away at like little pieces.
It sounds like sugar reduction and movement increase would be probably 2 really big areas.
And super easy. And super easy. I mean, I know people are like, my kid only likes sugar. I'm like, great, take it out of your house. I had a patient in last week who's been a chiropractic patient since he was a baby. He's 14. They're trying the meds for his ADHD. It's not working. And I said, okay, well, what are your favorite snacks? Because he doesn't love animal protein. So we're thinking, and they're like Oreos. And these are very educated parents. I'm like, oh, why do you have Oreos in your house? I know that sounds shocking to some of your listeners. Like, why do we have Oreos in our house when we know sugar is going to affect our child? And our child already doesn't feel good about themselves. So it's not a guilt thing. It's a like, hey, let's do something that's a little, if we can take away temptation a little bit. Have a house full of fruits and vegetables. Most kids like fruit. That sugar, we're not talking about that sugar. We're talking about processed sugar. All the colors of the vegetable. And that would be the other real big tip, is colorful foods in your kid's diet, because all of those plants have different vitamins and minerals. They're called phytonutrients that feed the brain and feed the body. And they're connected, right? If the body is inflamed, the brain is inflamed. If the brain is inflamed, the body doesn't work. We can't get around like, we're just doing brain health stuff.
Right. And that brings us right back to that cereal, cracker, granola bar, no plants there, at least no colorful plants, right?
And no protein, and no protein. And again, our brain is mostly fat and protein. So like my favorite tip for breakfast is fat and protein for breakfast. If you didn't have a carbohydrate, which most people do, there's some fruit, there's some sort of toast, but you had eggs or you had turkey sausages or you made your own. We make like grass-fed beef little patties when we're making dinner. Sometimes we'll make little patties for breakfast. If you eat dairy, yogurt has protein, but the sugar yogurt with the flavor in it, that's like a sugar bomb. So if your kid likes the fruit flavored yogurt, get the plain yogurt. Add some frozen fruit on top. Then there's a little bit of sweetness, but it's starting them off in the morning too, right? That's helpful. And then here's the other thing. So we talk about exercise, hugely important. This generation is so sedentary, and the research is showing that being sedentary is the same as smoking 2 packs a day was 40 years ago. That's how inflammatory it is to our body. You can't get away from it. Your kids have to move. We have to move. I mean, I see adults that don't move. They have the same brain inflammation.
I feel like I'm painting a picture as you talk of like, what is the motivation for parents? All right, step one, we don't want our kids to have Alzheimer's. And if they're showing any signs of brain inflammation, it's like they're at the top of the slide and Alzheimer's is at the bottom. Get them off the slide, right?
Yes.
We're looking at, how easy is it to get your kid outside and moving? How easy is it to get fruits and vegetables in your house? Well, actually, it's kind of hard. But if you picture your kid sitting there with a cigarette, you know what I mean? Yeah. You'd be like, oh, well, I can't have that. Like maybe that's hard to say no smoking to your kid. But for our brains, it would be so much, it's so obvious. Like, I'm not going to let that happen. So we can't let this happen.
And they're basic things, right? So like if we have a kid who has some neuroinflammation, so your kid, they're extraordinarily moody. They fall apart they really can't focus. They can't sleep. They're anxious all the time. You can't say to yourself, well, we're all anxious in my family, so we must have the gene. That's actually not true. We know that genes are turned on and off with whatever food and environment is presented. We know that now. We've known it for sure for at least a decade, if not longer. It's not information people talk about, but you are what you eat. And that we've talked about, probably for centuries. So if you know that you can't just accept that that is the case, then you have to look at your kid and go, how can I help your body optimally function? I'm going to take away the stuff that I know you shouldn't have, the sugary cereals, the granola bars that have vegetable powder in them, but are still 25 grams of carbohydrate. I'm going to give you a little protein. I'm going to give you some healthy fats because our brain needs them. Our patients with Alzheimer's and dementia, they're really high in fat. They're low in carbohydrate, which means they're not adding sugar to their diet. They're having starchy veggies, but they're feeding their brain with the stuff it needs, the fuel. So those two things are really important. And again, it comes back to, all the things that you do in the kitchen, stewardship, and the kids cook real food. They have to know how to make food. This is one way you can really engage them too, right? Pick a day a week. We do it. We don't do it every week. We've got tournaments on weekends, so sometimes we do it Monday. We're meal prepping, and I'm making my kids make something. Maybe not every week, maybe every other week. And the picky kids, because I know you do a lot of. There's some parents there that have really picky kids who won't eat anything green. I get it. I've seen them. We have to engage them in making something. And when they make it, they're, 70% more likely to eat something that they've made because they're so proud. So, getting kids into the kitchen, it's like so easy because you got to do it anyways. And then one of the other pieces, so we talk about one of the other pieces that's really missing is that loneliness. Loneliness is super inflammatory to the brain. And there's really good research on this. And we never think about our kids being lonely. Or we're being lonely, just not having a connection with them because we're busy working, we're busy taking care of things. I know I have 3. I know how it can be. Connecting with your kids and cooking. What a great way to do it. Like, prepare your food. Ask your kids, what should we do? Listen to them, stop and watch them do it. I think that connection and intimacy in relationships are one of the things we've really lost in modern parenting. And there's good reasons. I'm not saying that we're not busy, that kids are busy. They're doing programs. No one plays outside as much. But we can take those steps to make those connections so our children don't have that loneliness. That maybe that anxiety is, the fear of not feeling grounded because you don't have that community.
I mean, what you're saying is don't be overwhelmed by having 37 things to do. Look for every opportunity where you can hit multiple.
That's right. Going outside and playing, right? Going outside and playing. You're outdoors, you're getting the fresh air, and you're playing a sport. Cooking with your parents, cooking with your kids. You are connecting. You're making a conscious effort 1 or 2 hours a week to be present. And it's really hard. I know there's always 10 other things on your list. I know, but what is the purpose? What is the point if we are not there and they don't feel that we're there? And this way we're getting to cook and meal prep and they're getting it. It's, you're right. It's habit stacking. There's a lot on the internet with like habit stacking and cold plunging and all. You can habit stack your healthy habits with your kids too.
Right. And cram a bunch in that one activity. Like you said, the connection, we've got, movement, we've got confidence and building that. And then all the nutritive elements too. I just feel like we wouldn't wave the white flag in any other area. No parent ever says, well, my kid never potty trained. Like I just gave up, right? They're not learning to read, he's right. 10, but I don't really care. Like we really focus on some of these other things, possibly because they are externally graded or externally judged. Right. But I think we've got to think about our kids' brain and mental health in the same way. Plus, if we can get the inflammation down, we're going to increase success in every other area of life, right? Social life,
Absolutely.
academics, future success. It's all going to start to come together better if the brain is in the right place. It's the first building block.
I mean, 100%. And it's actually that simple. I think that when you look at the work of Dr. Terry Walls, this is a mentor of mine who was in a wheelchair, barely able to hold up her head. And she was like, God, I can't watch. She's a medical doctor. She had been suffering with MS for 26 years. And she'll say that the movement and the shift in what she was feeding her body and taking time to have the gratitude to just have that life with her kids and her partner, that radically shifted her pain. And she got herself out of that wheelchair, which no one believed. And so I think the challenge, especially the food part, people like to say, like, my kid has the diagnosis, so I'm good now. I've got the med. And I'm not saying either way about the drugs. What I'm saying is that the diagnosis is a symptom. It's a reaction to some things. And just to accept it, that's all you can do is unfortunate. And we could do better, and we should do better. And if you're tired and you're that parent, then you need to do better for you. You need to sleep better. You need to eat better, because the only person that's being affected by your ability to, not be, you're tired and your ability to function are the people you love the most. So even doing it for yourself, I mean, it's like a double whammy. It's why I love treating parents. I'm like, look, you're all going to do it in your house and watch how everyone shifts. Oh, this person's anxiety is gone. Hey, this person focuses better. We can't just accept that food doesn't have an impact on children's health. Like and it's because doctors don't say, hey, like, stop eating so much sugar. Maybe don't eat red and blue dyed things. There is a subset of kids that you give them amoxicillin with red dye, or you give them a lollipop, and their brain is inflamed, and you see it. They're like, they can't stop themselves, and they feel out of control. That poor child. So, it's not a guilt or shame thing. It's like, we can do things. Food is transformative, and it doesn't have to be super expensive. It just needs to start somewhere at the basics, like a banana or a cucumber or a red pepper, a piece of good grass-fed beef or an egg, like, there's so many things. And I think just giving a kid that opportunity, I often say to kids, hey, like, what if you had control over that feeling of anxiety you have? And they're like, I can't. I'm just anxious. I'm like, but what if I told you you had control? Would you take the opportunity within a million things that if I gave you 4 things to try, if you could take control? And I'm like, yeah, okay. They're never convinced until they come back and they're like, I think I feel a little bit better. Because no one's told them that they have control. So even empowering our kids with the control, like, you want to feel better? It's not a drug from the outside that I'm going to give you. Fine. You can do this better. Let's go to bed earlier. That's the last piece. I definitely want to stress the sleep. Our kids are chronically overtired. And I don't know if it's because they're hiding their phone under their pillow. Hey, if you're that parent that lets your preteen, your 12-year-old daughter sleep with their phone under their bed, please don't do that. They're not neurosurgeons. No one needs to get them in the middle of the night. You're affecting how they feel about themselves every day by limiting the amount of sleep they get, because they have no control. Geez, most adults don't have control. I see that all the time. So, that sleep piece is really important. And if your kid's not sleeping, you got to take a look at that, right? I had one kid cut out gluten. This is a crazy kind of story. He was really anxious. He didn't sleep well. We cut out gluten as a first step. That's one of the most inflammatory things out there. So we're like, let's give it a shot for 4 weeks. Let's see how you do. He was all in. He sleeps through the night. He doesn't wake up multiple times. Then 6 or 8 weeks after that, he had to go to a party. They served something that had some gluten in it. He's like, well, whatever, I'm going to try it. 1 week, he couldn't sleep. 1 week. Which is severe. I think that if the parents had tested him for celiac, it's possible that he would have had one of those celiac genes. But that being said, you don't know what's affecting your kid if you don't try. So try a little bit of everything. 1 more vegetable a week. That's an easy one. When you go grocery shopping, pick another vegetable. Have your kids pick a vegetable. What looks interesting? Let's figure out how to make this.
I mean, this has been so motivational, inspirational, a lot of practical sprinkles, but it's all about just trying one. Where can we start where we can reduce that brain inflammation? Like, we all want our kids to feel their very best. If they're cold, we give them a blanket. If they're hot, we give them a fan. If they're struggling and their brain's on fire, we got to remove the fuel and we got to add those calming, good habits.
Well, and you said it earlier, Katie. I mean, here's the simple one. Remove the excess sugar. It's really simple, actually. We can lament it because we like our sugar. Add more fruit if you want. It is the easiest thing and probably the most impactful in the short term. and get them moving.
That's good to know. It's the two great places to start. And I really appreciate just this interesting connection, right? I really believe education is power and empowerment. And the more we as parents know, the better we're taking care of ourselves, the better we can take care of our kids. Friends, we're going to link in the show notes to some resources that Dr. Kristina has for you. Be sure to go check her out because sometimes we can do it on our own. Sometimes we need a little help from a professional, and there is definitely no shame in that. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks so much, Katie. That was great. I really enjoyed hopefully giving some pieces of information to people to have them think a little bit differently.
Absolutely. Let's shift our brains and help our kids shift theirs. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Healthy Parenting Handbook podcast. I hope your brain feels fed and your heart feels full and that you feel connected, knowing that there are other parents on this journey with you. We're just trying to raise healthy, independent adults. And the next time you think, man, there is no handbook for this job. Now there is the Healthy Parenting Handbook. Look up the podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. Please leave a review, my friends, as that helps other parents who need this information to find us. And of course, subscribe. That's a huge help. You can also look for our shorts as a reel on Instagram at Katie Kimball Kids Cook, or subscribe to the Healthy Parenting Handbook Shorts channel on YouTube. You'll get those bite-sized portions of healthy parenting advice.